Hey there, so before this video begins, I just want to give some context. This is a re-upload of an older challenge run that I had done for my gaming channel back when the plan was to have one. However, I decided to roll those videos into this channel because A, I don't want those projects to go to waste, and B, I enjoy doing them and I want to do more. So while I work on the anime videos that you guys know me for, as well as a few other gaming videos that I had in mind, I'll be buffering the channel with these old projects. That does also mean that the Patreon shoutouts for these videos won't be up to date because they are old, so I do apologize for that. I hope you enjoyed the video if you haven't seen it already, and I will catch you guys again very soon. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a franchise that would be an understatement to say I was absolutely obsessed with as a kid, completely taking over my life with the anime and the card game. I remember getting my hands on the Yu-Gi starter deck and my friends all picking up the Kaiba starter deck. Every chance we got, we were dueling, but we were also gamers and we were wondering, what if Yu-Gi-Oh! Had a video game? Wouldn't that be cool? Well, one day my buddy Dustin comes to school with the topic of today's challenge, Yu-Gi-Oh! Forbidden Memories for the PlayStation 1. He bragged about how cool it was and how he had a blast playing it, and me being a 5th grader, I damn near begged him to let me borrow it for the weekend, and he did. When I popped the game in and got down to business, I knew I was in for some craziness because this game is not like any other Yu-Gi-Oh! Game out there in terms of mechanics and difficulty. I never beat it as a kid, so I wanted to double back and see if this game was as hard as I remembered, and for a while it was. Now, what are we doing today? Well, we're going to be beating the World Tournament of Forbidden Memories with our set of rules. Wait, why only the World Tournament? Well, that's because I genuinely don't know if this challenge is possible for a casual like me because the final stretch of this game is legendary in its difficulty and the AI is designed to cheat. I'll link a video in the description by the YouTuber The Rixer that goes into more detail about this, but for now, let's just say it's probably outside the scope of my skill set. So what are the rules? That's actually pretty simple. We must duel every character that's available to, meaning in the first section we have to leave and return to the palace in order to duel Simon before going on to the dueling grounds. We are not allowed to save the game at any point during the run. If we lose any duel at any time, we have to start a completely new game. The exception to this rule is the first encounter with Haishin, who you're scripted to lose to. If you win, he'll just duel you again, like a child throwing a temper tantrum. We are allowed to go back out to the main menu to farm for cards and free duel, but losing a free duel does still count toward failing. We're going to be using the 5-card mod to make our lives a little easier, so we're only allowed to farm a total of 20 times in free duel, 10 in Ancient Egypt and 10 in the World Tournament. If we don't get the cards we want, oh well. We cannot re-roll for a deck. If we find that the deck we've been given on that run is trash, unfortunately we just have to make do with it. Lastly, purchasing cards with star chips is perfectly fine since we'll be getting star chips through the gameplay loop. But why a lose and reset run? Well, here's some lore about me. When I was a kid, I got a PS1 for Christmas, but not a memory card because my mom didn't know I'd need one. So for a good chunk of owning a PlayStation as a kid, I just didn't have the option to save any game progress. This in a way is kind of a throwback to that to see if it's something I could have actually done. Maybe not as a kid, but even maybe as a teenager. Before we begin, I do these challenges live over at twitch.tv/somewherepastnever, so if you want to hang out next time I'm working on a challenge, feel free to give me a follow. Also, if there are any weird or fun gaming challenges you'd like to see me do, please leave a comment letting me know. I'm always looking for challenges that are fun for me to play, but also fun for you to watch. So let's go ahead and jump into what this challenge ended up becoming for me. First thing you need to know about starting a new game is that each time you're given a completely random deck with varying types of cards, but you're always guaranteed to get one field card, an equip card, and then there's a 50-50 chance for either Raigeki or Dark Hole. Because we're taking a feather out of the cap of most speedrunners, our standard win condition is the Twin-Headed Thunder Dragon. So the spell cards we want to see are things like Beast Fangs, Invigoration, Dragon Treasure, etc. We really want to see Raigeki since that clears the monsters on the enemy field, and Dark Hole unfortunately clears the entire board. Lastly, to fit into this framework, if we're really lucky, we want to see at least one dragon and one thunder monster. Unfortunately, our initial deck was a pretty mixed bag of monster types and we ended up with Dark Hole. Although we did get an early Dark Energy, but it doesn't do us too much good right now. Like I said earlier, the game doesn't play with the standard mechanics of Yu-Gi-Oh! As people knew at the time. Regardless of a monster's star level, you could just normal summon or set it on the field without tributing. On top of that, the fusion system is where this game gets really bonkers and where the learning curve really punishes players who aren't knowledgeable about fusion recipes. In order to fuse monsters during your turn, you press up on the D-pad on every card you want to add to the sequence and press X. This will begin a chain of fusion attempts that can yield incredibly powerful monsters or just waste your cards. Most of these combinations are based on the monster types, which you can keep track of based on the icon that appears beside their name. To make matters even more complicated, some cards have a hidden second type that aren't explicitly told to the player that can mess up a fusion if you aren't aware it was there. And there are fake types which will fail in a standard recipe even if that monster's type is exactly what you needed to fuse it with something else. But if you don't know any of this or haven't played this game in literal decades like me, you end up just having to bash cards together and see what sticks. I remembered a few of these combos like Pyro plus Beast to make Flame Cerberus, which is actually spelled wrong in the game and says Flame Cerebrus for some reason. Females plus Plants makes Queen of Autumn Leaves, and a handful of others. So my entire first attempt was just me trying to remember what to put together. Thankfully, the first few duels are mercifully easy. At the beginning of the game, our biggest problem is getting cards out of our deck that we have no use for. With the monster types being so mixed up, our deck is just a hodgepodge of incompatible cards, which in turn lowers our ability to put strong monsters on the field reliably, which then lowers our survivability. We cruised through the Egypt portion pretty easily and spent some time farming yugioh for potential dragons in order to prepare for the World Tournament. We end up sort of falling into the rhythm that persists in small ways through the rest of the challenge, where we found specific monsters that give us the upper hand at times while we're still trying to get the cards we need. Specifically, Flame Cerberus was an MVP in basically every run. We go on to lose to Haishin's phallic jawline like we're supposed to, and head on to the World Tournament. As a kid, it took me ages to beat this, and there were a handful of duelists that I was concerned about since their best monsters would trump anything in my deck, especially in the event I didn't have Twin-Headed Thunder Dragon to use. Bandit Keith has a chance to play Zoa, Bakura can wall you right out the gate with Labyrinth Wall or Millennium Shield, Pegasus can come out swinging with Bakuri Box, or if you're exceedingly unlucky, he can use his first turn to drop the devastating Meteor Bee Dragon on the field, which would completely kill the momentum of a solid run dead in its tracks. Ishizu can make your life miserable with Black Skull Dragon, but thankfully that didn't happen to me in any of my attempts. Kaiba, the last duelist we'll need to worry about, has a pretty rough deck to deal with at times too. On top of using the same walls as Bakura, he can also hit us with his trademark Blue Eyes White Dragon. So naturally, moving into the World Tournament, I was nervous. Our deck wasn't exactly the best, and I wasn't exactly the most experienced player by a long shot. Rex didn't give us much trouble, and he never really does. For the sake of this challenge and my skill level, Rex and Mai are our safest farming spots, but we spend our time here going after Rex. We did walk away with a few dragons and beast monsters, and then we moved on to Weevil. Weevil is another duel where there isn't much to worry about, and he did drop a dragon for us to put to use. Mai is the first duel in the run that has me a little nervous, because if she builds up momentum through fusing creatures, it can end up being a problem real fast. We do have just enough cards to make a twin-headed, but not enough to consistently rely on it. I actually made a mistake here and fused a dragon zombie into my thunder dragon, and instead of creating twin-headed, I made goddamn Skull Greymon. Luckily, Mai wasn't able to build up momentum, and we got through this duel with relative ease. Now we're getting into the duels where I know I need to be careful. Bandit Keith gave me so many problems as a kid, so I went in with a healthy dose of nerves. Unfortunately, this is still the point in which we didn't know too many decent fusions, so I left several potential solid fusions on the table. We lucked into a Black Dragon Jungle King that pulled us out of a jam that gave us an opening for Twin-Headed. Although, if I just fused my Thunder card with Dragon Zombie, I could have kept Jungle King and Twin-Headed. But at this point, I didn't know that. Thankfully, our luck pulled me through that duel despite the plethora of mistakes I didn't know I was making. Shoddy's next up and is a joke of a duel. I don't think I've ever seen anyone lose to him, and if someone does lose to him, they should just find a new game to play. Look at this man, he is tired. I don't even think he knows what's in his deck. How he made it this far up the ladder with the cards we've seen him play is an impressive mystery. Though I will admit I completely forgot that Shoddy has a really good drop pool if you choose to farm him. Even with hindsight, I'm not sure if I'd have felt comfortable enough going up against Mai and Bandit Keith with the deck we had just to use our farming time on Shoddy. So we dunk on him like we're supposed to and call it a night so that I can come back fresh the next day. Okay, so digging through my VODs, when we get back to the game, we're back in ancient Egypt, and that's my own fault. I decided to play some Forbidden Memories with a 15 card mod in my free time, thinking that since it's a different ROM technically, it should have its own save file and save states. But apparently not. So I accidentally overwrote all the previous day's work and needed to start from the beginning. Go me! Moving forward, I'm not going to cover every duel or we'd be here for quite a while. Thankfully, attempt number 2 won't take long to cover because we end up getting thrashed by Seto. Our deck this time around was almost comically bad, and he hit us with a first turn Battle Ox followed by a second turn Mystical Sand, and we just weren't drawing the cards we needed to put up a solid counterattack. While we were able to take out the Battle Ox, the Mystical Sand proved to be a significant problem. Unfortunately, we were unable to do anything about that, and we wiped. Our third deck actually came equipped with several things we wanted to see, including 1 Dragon, 1 Thunder, Raigeki, and Umi. It was an incredible stroke of luck with the only thing missing being a solid equip card.
Unfortunately for me, I may be lucky, but I'm also an idiot. During my duel with Villager 3, Mystical Sand was once again giving me trouble, so I played a little risky by allowing myself to take damage to set up Umi with a Thunder Dragon. Instead of taking out the monster beside Mystical Sand to force her into defense mode, I instead went tit for tat and traded my beefed up dragon, which left my side of the field open. I was hoping my deck would give me something to defend myself with on the next turn. It did not. On our 4th attempt, the deck we start with isn't anything to write home about, but we do climb back to the World Tournament, where it's Weevil that decides to give us a rough time. He hits us with a first turn Jiraiya, which is already above most of the creatures we can casually fuse at this point, so it's not an ideal start. On top of that, we're once again unable to pull any cards to help us defend ourselves, and we end up getting washed. That's a pretty common theme when playing this game in general, is just the feeling of knowing you have the cards you need to defend yourselves, but just not having the luck to draw them. Our 5th deck came with 2 dragons, Mountain, and Dark Energy. We don't end up with any thunder creatures and get unlucky enough to have Dark Hole again. We've been getting dreadfully unlucky with the Raigeki absence, but what can you really do about that? This deck was falling into this weird zone of just not having a ton of decent fusion materials whose types match, so we ended up finishing the duel grounds and spent the rest of the day farming Villager 2. With that being said, I'm sorry to say that I do have to skip day 3 of the run as well. That's because I'm just straight up missing footage here and I didn't realize it until I decided to start scripting this, so by now Twitch has deleted most of the VODs. Based on what I said at the beginning of day 4 though, it's clear that we made it pretty far with a good deck but got steamrolled by Pegasus when we couldn't draw the cards we needed. If I remember correctly, Pegasus ended up walling us with a first turn Meteor B Dragon. Although I don't have the footage to show, that duel marks the furthest we've gotten so far. Hopping into attempt number 6, we pushed through a decent portion of the game with relative ease, and instead of farming Rex in the World Tournament, we decided to go after Mai, who has a pretty good drop pool of her own. At this point, we're in a rhythm and heading into our 6th duel of the farming session when Mai decides she doesn't feel like being a punching bag anymore. We were trying something different with this deck, by which I mean we started adding Winged Beast into the fold, since fusing them with a Pyro monster will net you Crimson Sunbird, the strongest fusion we can make outside of Twin-Headed, which further pushed our attack and survivability up more. This did bloat our deck a little bit though in the way of stalling out potential fusions. Mai comes out with a 7-colored fish, and I'm stuck in the unenviable position of having to cycle cards. Cycling cards is the act of purposely throwing away cards via fusion to make room for cards you want to see, since you always have 5 cards in your hand in this game. Mai drops a Pumpkin on her side of the field to really begin applying the pressure, and we are struggling to find any kind of defense aside from single card defense stalling. We managed to pull a Metal Dragon out of our ass to take out the Pumpkin, but we get screwed by the Guardian Star system. Wait, what the hell is a Guardian Star? So I haven't mentioned the Guardian Stars because, to be quite honest, I never really committed to memory what the chart is. It's basically a huge rock paper scissors system that can cause you or the enemy to gain 500 attack and defense before battle damage is calculated. Each creature can choose from one of 2 stars available to it before it's placed on the field, and once you do, you're locked in. So even if your monster is statistically better than the enemies, there's always a chance a card can come out that will benefit from a Guardian Star and take you out. I honestly hate this system because it's never explicitly explained to the player, nor are there any in-game charts for you to refer to. My 7-colored fish benefits from a Guardian Star that our dragon is vulnerable to, and once again puts me in a terrible position before following it up with a Dark Elf. On the next turn, it was over. We were out of options and Mai went in for the kill, pushing us into attempt number 7. This deck was legitimately so bad. Fiends alone took up nearly 25% of our deck. The only real silver lining here was ending up with Raigeki and Horn of Light. I'm not gonna lie, this attempt doesn't last long at all. Just like Mai, I guess Villager 2 got sick of my shit because on the first turn he runs a Stone Dragon. And let me remind you, this deck is absolute trash. We're farming him even before dueling Jono because we were in desperate need of better cards. By the second turn, he turned his Stone Dragon into a twin-headed Thunder Dragon. So we were suddenly in very deep shit. The upside here was that I wasn't overly attached to this deck and we were early enough in the run that starting over wasn't a huge setback. If anything, he was probably doing me a service by forcing me to start over with a new deck. Attempt number 8 yields us with a deck that is nearly 25% plant monsters this time. Fortunately, plant monsters are fairly easy to fuse with a decent portion of the other monster types, so I didn't mind all that much. While there weren't any dragons or thunder monsters, we did end up with another Raigeki and Dragon Treasure. With everything else, the types were a bit all over the place, not nearly as bad as the previous deck, but still not incredible either. This attempt came to an abrupt end because on this day I'd added the stipulation that if someone subscribed, I'd restart. Someone did, so I restarted and called it for the day. I Attempts 9, 10, and 11 were also shut down by someone joining the community, and that was when I decided to take this added layer of difficulty off the table because I was beginning to get frustrated. Especially because attempt 11 had made it more than halfway through the World Tournament with a pretty solid deck before we were forced to restart. I'm very much grateful for the people that do decide to subscribe to my Twitch channel, but I had to take this layer of difficulty off the table. It was killing me. Attempt 12 has unfortunately been lost to the shadow realm of Twitch's VOD deletion, which is partially my fault because this was at a time when I was still splitting my streams in half between 2 games, so rounding up all the footage was tougher than it should have been. It's very likely that Attempt 12 was probably buried in a VOD where a different game was the thumbnail and initial title. So let's move on to attempt number 13. I'd been away from the game for a couple of weeks since I'd been playing through Final Fantasy XVI on stream, but I was more than happy to jump back in with a renewed desire to complete this challenge. By this point in the game, I'd internalized a decent number of common but powerful monsters to continuously give us a leg up in battle. My go-tos ended up being Queen of Autumn Leaves, Mystical Sand, Nekogao, Flame Cerberus, Flower Wolf, and Pumpkin. Once dragons get added to the mix, that's when Metal Dragon, Black Dragon, Jungle King, and Twin-Headed start showing up. Not a crazy impressive pool, but we were able to consistently and more importantly reliably make these creatures. The tough part was getting lucky enough to gather cards with the correct types. The ideal deck for me was always a balance of plant monsters, pyro monsters, female cards, beasts, and then of course dragons and thunders. Zombies were also an easy way to get to Twin-Headed, and were important for Pumpkin, so we like to see those too. Anyway, Villager 2 decides to be a dickhead again and becomes a problem. It's early enough in this attempt that we run into what was often the biggest contributor to a loss, with that being a fairly disorganized deck and the inability to draw the cards we need at the proper times. So even though we had no business losing here, we did. On to attempt 14. The deck we're given is a bit more balanced than most of what we've started with, but it still lacks all the things we need for something truly powerful. We don't end up with any dragons or thunders, no good field card, no good equip card, and we're stuck with Dark Hole again. We do get a bit lucky that a couple of our warriors are women, and we have several rock monsters, so Mystical Sand is already on the table. From here, it's a steady climb as long as we play it diligently. Most of the Egypt section goes smoothly and without much fanfare, but Villager 3 ends up giving us 2 dragons and a thunder monster, which was insanely good luck and definitely boosted my confidence a bit. I know I've been breezing through this, but one thing that's hard to convey is how time-consuming dueling can be, especially once you get to the World Tournament, which is why starting over can honestly be exhausting and deflating even if you end up with a good deck. So this takeaway was a much-needed injection for morale. With having access to Black Dragon, Jungle King, and 1 Twin-Headed, I decided to take the time to farm our favorite villager, hoping to score some of his better creatures. By the time our farming was done, we ended up with more thunders, dragons, pyros, and female monsters. It successfully adds some much needed versatility to our deck and kicks open the door for guaranteed fusions in basically every hand. Eventually we do leave Egypt behind with probably the strongest deck we've ever had and head into the World Tournament. The duel against Rex goes off without a hitch thanks to the many dragon fusions we can make, and we spend our time farming him right away even though we don't necessarily need to. We do pull a mountain on the first duel with him, which pushes the power ceiling for our deck even higher. Despite our efforts, we only managed to pull 1 card we care about from our farming session, with that being a Thunder monster. I could and probably should have farmed Mai, but after her sudden attitude problem, I wasn't willing to risk the run on getting a bad draw. Our deck was just too good and that would crush my morale. As is the case once farming is done, we're relying on the mercy of the card drops from each individual duel now. Weevil comes and goes like the cockroach he is and doesn't hand over any cards we care about. We do spend a moment out in the main menu to purchase a Thunder monster, Lala, but since you can only purchase 1 copy of a card, we also purchase Mega Thunderball, a Yamatano Dragon Scroll, and a Petite Dragon. Originally I was going to grab Jirai Gumo for the extra attack power, but I figured leaning into making a true dragon deck was the way to go. I was concerned about overpopulating my deck with dragons, but I was confident it was worth the risk. Mai gets wrecked by a first turn Twin-Headed Thunder Dragon, followed by a Jungle King on my part. We don't let up and just end up hammering away so that she never builds momentum. We swap in Mechanical Chaser for their solid attack power and move on to Bandit Keith. We take the lead in this match thanks to Mechanical Chaser having 50 extra attack points than the monster he ends up having to throw into defense, and we follow that up with an Axe Raider to further bolster our defense in case anything spicy comes out on his end. We do not want to see Zoa, and if we do, we'll need to wait for Twin-Headed or get Mountain on the field to make Jungle King strong enough to deal with it, but for now, we're still in the clear. Thankfully, Bandit Keith's AI basically goes brain dead and allows us to steamroll right over him. We're going to skip Shoddy because there's nothing interesting to see here. Let this man go to sleep. He's been awake for more than 2,000 years. He EB. Bakura is up next, and the anxiety is beginning to settle in for me. We only have a handful of duels ahead of us, but any of these duels can completely obliterate the progress we've scraped together. To start, we open with Flame Cerberus, and all we're hoping for is the AI to not slap its best stuff on the field. Much to my horror, Bakura opens with a labyrinth wall, and without twin-headed and mountain, we quite literally cannot do anything about this. So from here, it's a matter of stalling out the enemy and not allowing him to stack his field too much on top of drawing the cards we need. Bakura also begins stacking his backfield, which is very concerning. To amplify my stress, we choose the wrong Guardian Star for our twin-headed, so even with Mountain, that particular twin-headed wouldn't be able to kill the wall. But now our field is loaded and we can't skip our turn without playing anything, so I'd begun considering waiting for and playing Dark Hole just to reset the board. In a weird twist of luck, Bakura plays Dark Hole and opens the door for me to get back into the fight, which I immediately do with Jungle King. Eventually I do draw what I need to make another twin-headed, but I opt for the alternate Guardian Star this time, just in case I run into another labyrinth wall. The duel finally ends with a victory for us and we can move on to Pegasus. Right out the gate, our hand is terrible and we have no real choice but to play a throwaway card in the hopes of cycling in something better. Peggy acts in our favor and throws a monster in defense, and we spring back with a Flame Cerberus who is quickly destroyed by a Crimson Sunbird. So we're once again on the defense and I can already feel the tension settling into my bones. We've come too far, our deck is too good! I cannot let this get out of control. I need to do something and I need to do it fast. In a show of either luck, mercy, or some combination of both, we draw a Dragon Zombie which only requires one Thunder Monster to fuse into twin-headed, putting us back in the driver's seat of this duel. We only get to enjoy this for one turn though, because Pegasus decides to dunk on us with a Raigeki, so we're back to square one again! However, we have enough Thunders in our hand that if we draw one Dragon, we can make another twin-headed. Loading our deck with dragons worked in our favor, and we are able to make the monster we need on the following turn. We're able to keep a firm hand on the momentum and keep Pegasus from throwing any more surprises my way. The penultimate duo is Ishizu, who I've definitely had trouble with in the past. A first hand is pretty terrible, so I decide to cycle through most of it. Although she comes out swinging with a Sea King Dragon, we're able to make twin-headed on the second turn. Ishizu is also known for playing Umi to power up her water monsters, which would make twin-headed even stronger. She's the kind of person that you do not want to let get any kind of roll both on her monsters and with her backfield. We get exceedingly lucky in keeping her on the defense, and we barrel right through this duel without breaking a single sweat. But that brings us to the final duel of this challenge against the face of Kaiba Corp himself. I'm most concerned about a first turn Blue Eyes White Dragon, or honestly any Blue Eyes at all. Since our only field card is Mountain, playing that will only make Blue Eyes stronger alongside our twin-headed. The only hope we have is to beat him down before he can summon his iconic companion monster. By some miracle, we're given a first turn twin-headed, which immediately gives us the upper hand, pending any white dragons that may or may not rear their heads. I'm both focused and terrified right now because I've been doing this challenge for several streams, and this is the first time I've made it to the end of the tournament. We can see the finish line from here, and all I could think about was how painful it would be to lose with a deck this strong and have to start all over. Kaiba goes on the defense and I opt not to go for Mountain, instead going for the Flame Cerberus followed by a Jungle King. All Kaiba has to do to damn near ensure my demise and end this run is summon his legendary dragon. It all comes down to what he does next. And to my anxious relief, the monster I feared never materializes. Amphibious Bugroth hits the scene in its place. Kaiba uses the creature to take out our Flame Cerberus, but without a Blue Eyes to deter us in any way, this duel is ours for the taking, and after 14 attempts, the challenge finally comes to a conclusion. I had fun with this challenge, and it was nice to revisit a part of my childhood in a way that was both fun and still possible. With as fun as it was though, I was definitely glad it was over. I struggled this hard just to get through the World Tournament, so now I'm positive I'd have never made it through the second Egypt section, let alone the final 7. That would have been a fool's errand, and at least for today, I am no fool. If you enjoyed the video, consider leaving a like and subscribe for more gaming challenges. I do these types of things live over at twitch.tv/somewherepastnever, so if you want to drop in and say hello, give me a follow. Also, if there's any weird but fun challenges you'd like to see me do or attempt, let me know in the comments below. Remember to take care of yourselves and others. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.